Hey everybody, it's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. And I think it is one of those weeks that we are so excited to be here to talk to you. We have a really great guest, but we also have a really great time of the year going on as far as fishing goes. We always start with a little fishing report. So how's it been going for us?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty good, pretty consistent. We went out and we've been playing around with the Onyx Fish app, and we found a fun little lake and caught some stalker rainbows. That was pretty fun. I've never really fished trout out of my boat. And so figuring it, it was funny because we did mark a lot of fish all day and just going through the whole tackle box trying to find something that would work was pretty fun. So it seemed like the fish that we were catching were stuff that was stocked from last year or maybe a year or two previous, but there's a lot of them in there, and they were mixed in with bluegills.
They were mixed in with bluegills. And so I think in the beginning, that's what we were targeting. And then we saw on the graphs that there were just all kinds of other fish swimming through, but like cruising. It was really an interesting and kind of fun thing to watch. And sometimes it's easy to assume, oh, that could be bass. But in this lake, it happened to be trout. So like you said, we had to really dig through our tackle boxes, and we found actually two different buggy type presentations. So you had a little fly type Widowmaker.
Yeah, the hammer fly.
The hammer fly.
Yep.
And then I was actually using one of the Euro tackle little plastic bugs.
Yeah, the Hellgrammite, I think.
Yeah, and the brown, like very natural colors. And
Happy 4th.
You know what was really fun is those fish were just as active fishing them as what we saw them cruising around. So, we were talking about trout fishing from the boat, at least being a little bit new to you, new to me a little bit. And it doesn't sound like, I don't know, it sounds like it should be like fishing bluegills, but it was different. It was really fun. Those fish really will follow that bait. So it was really about using the whole water column. Actually, that was really fun and much different from a typical bluegill bite. So I would say it was nice that we had that little adventure on Saturday, because Sunday, honestly, we took a gamble on a little teeny tiny lake, and there was fish in there, but I don't know if it was.
Well, I think we got
coming through. There was
we got ran off by the phantom radar. We picked all our stuff up, and then we got home, and then the radar never appeared. Like the rain on the radar never appeared. So we kind of were like, oh, we could have stayed out. But yeah, it was a couple hours on that lake, and we did mark some fish. I will say this is the time of year that a lot of pan fishermen start to get discouraged, because a lot of the fish that you have been fishing, up shallow, a lot of times have moved out a little bit, and they can be a little bit harder to find. But don't get discouraged, because if you have a trolling motor, you can always catch some crappies and bluegills. So, if you want more on that, just hit us up. But I think this is water temps should be stable coming through here. It might warm up a little bit, but all the way through fall, we should be steady as she goes.
I guess we'll find out. Lots of different weather patterns coming through, even just this upcoming weekend. Rain coming through in lots of different waves. Hopefully some sun mixed in. Hopefully we'll get out on the boat. But, it's a lot of people going to be out there this weekend because it is a long holiday weekend. So, we might, I don't know how we're going to pick our body of water. I'm looking for something that's not going to be super busy.
I'm picking a no motor lake, I think.
Oh my gosh. But as far as fishing goes, I can't wait to hear a report from our guest, because he is always doing so many fun things. So let's bring him in without further ado. So Matt, thanks so much for being here this evening.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And it's really cool to be here kind of in an informal setting. I feel like every time we see you is like a big event or an expo. And, I think people have fun bumping into you. But in case there are people that are still getting to know you, can you introduce yourself and tell us about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Matthew Crawford. I'm a fishing content creator. I post a lot on Facebook, mostly informative fishing reports, and Lake Winnebago is where I spend most of my time. But ever since graduating from college in May, I've been really enjoying getting around Wisconsin a bit more, exploring all the fisheries we have. And so today I was more so in the center of the state. Tonight I'll be over on Lake Michigan. So going all over the place.
And you've been targeting, gosh, a little bit of everything as far as species. So, how do you choose on a daily basis what adventure you're going to go on?
So my favorite part about fishing is that it just never gets old because you fish for anything you want on any given day. There's no one telling you what you have to fish for. So usually I'll just pick a species one day. So let's say it's walleyes because that's just a very popular fish around here on Lake Winnebago. If I fish those and I do really well, the odds of me wanting to go back and do that the next day are pretty low. I'll often want to challenge myself and try and learn something new because that for me is what's enjoyable about fishing. It just, again, it never gets old. There's always something new to learn, a new way to catch fish, a new place to catch fish, a new type of fish to catch. I caught my first lake trout ever the other day. So when you guys were talking about trout, I know you were saying rainbows, but trout are one I definitely want to get more into.
Well, and that's really funny because as I was thinking back, Emily was kind of explaining the behaviors. I did think a lot about a lot of the videos I've watched of lake trout fishing. I know that Lake Michigan, a lot of times it's a trolling bite, but Lake Superior is a good jigging place, and there's a lot of Great Lakes up in Canada that can have some good jigging bites. And
Well, if you've ever watched a Clayton Schick video.
yeah, right. And
Yeah.
so some of the videos, that I've seen, a lot of times you'll get like one or two fish in there, and one will be interested, but that makes the other one interested. And you like, unlike normal panfish bites, even though these fish are pretty much the same, um, you have to reel. Like you have to get that fish to fall like so fast. Like it's like you're reeling in your bait,
And then it's an up bite.
yeah, and then they hit it, and like I had one that just like came completely out of the water because it couldn't hit the brakes. Like it just hit it right before it came out of the water. And they weren't giant fish, but it was just so fun, just like figuring out that pattern. Like you said, you and I have a very similar style. If I'm really successful on something, I'd like to go challenge myself with something else. Catching is fun, but I think fishing is more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Next week, or technically the night of the 4th, I'm headed up to Canada. I'm headed up to Cliff Lake Resort in Ontario, and they've got lake trout there. And so that's,
Nice.
I mean, they have walleyes, they have smallmouth. That's cool. They've got muskies, but by far the top of my list is not any of those. It's the lake trout because I have caught one and it was caught trolling like a week or two ago. So to me, if we can go figure out how to catch them jigging, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, bring some tube jigs, I heard.
Yeah. Plan right now is some heavier jig heads because we'll be in like 40 to 60 feet of water most likely. Probably like 3/8 to half-ounce jig heads. Either fluke style baits like a Kalen's jerk minnow. I know those supposedly work well. And then paddle tails could work. And I've also got plenty of like shiver minnow jigging wrap style baits that I've heard those work well in the deep water too.
Thanks.
And make sure to bring some spoons, and make sure to bring this and that and everything.
I didn't even think about spoons. So that's a good point.
Yeah. But that's the problem is it's like I'm the kind of person I'm like, oh, I better grab this too. I better grab that too. I better grab that too. I end up with one of everything. But like you're saying, that's going to be a really fun adventure, and I cannot wait to hear more about it. One of the things that I learned is I always hear that trout are so spooky, like that they're so smart, they're so spooky, whatever. And I guess you have to remember that they're a predator fish though. So I don't even know if it's that they're spooky or that they're smart. So like you're saying, if you can be like a good dead minnow, you'll probably get one.
Yeah, my stream trout fishing experience is much more extensive, and I've gone for lots of brown trout and trout streams. And it's definitely true that they're spooky in the sense that if you're just tearing through the stream, stomping through, making a ton of noise, splashing a lot of water, like you will look up ahead of you 50 yards and you'll see a trout like in the distance, just the shadow of the trout just zipping out of that hole that it was sitting in. And even if you find it again, it's not going to eat once they're spooked. So I know they're spooky. I don't know about the other kinds of trout though. I know they're all very darty though. Like when I've seen ice fishing videos of them on underwater cameras and through sight holes and things like that, like they don't just stop and then slowly work their way up to a bait. It's like they're constantly darting, and it's like sometimes it's a last second decision that they're actually going to bite, it looks like.
Yeah, and that's a really indicative feature of those the red mussel fish. They tend to be a lot like that, especially as the water gets cold. They get a little bit more active because their muscles build up lactic acid just like ours, and so the colder it is, the less stress they have, and that's why they're so darty. It's because they're just like they're kind of like cats that are just like going around chasing everything, right? So
Hmm.
it was like Emily said, it was kind of weird because we could pull up on a group of trout with our boat, and the water was fairly clear. I wouldn't say it was gin clear, but it was fairly clear, and they didn't really care, And I spend most of my time, in trout streams for work, and so like you said, you can see trout like 100 yards ahead if the water's clear enough, just like darting out, and you're like, how did you even know it was coming? Like, but these other the ones that were in the lake seem to be less spooky, and so I don't know. Maybe it's because the river trout are a lot more accessible to predators, so maybe they just have to be like, there's birds and otters. Yeah, they have to be looking a little bit further, but I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably the most frustrating part of stream trout fishing for me is not that they spook, because when I'm out by myself, like I really don't spook that many, I feel like, because I'm very tactful about how I move and I'm very try to be quiet. But I love sharing fishing with other people and sharing about how to catch them. So if I can take friends of mine or even just strangers from Facebook out and show them how to catch fish, I love to do that. But the problem with trout streams is that the more people you have in a stream, the noisier you are and the more likely you are to spook fish. So almost every time I've taken people, one was an exception. He was really, really good about being quiet, like just walking in step with me. Him and I both caught tons of fish. But other times I've taken people who aren't familiar with trout fishing and they want to do it and they want to catch trout. And we always catch some because they're trout. A lot of them are just, if you hit them on the head with a crankbait, like they're gonna eat it. But still, that's if they don't spook. So a lot of them I'll just see like stomping through the water because it's two or three of us making a lot of noise. Look up, oh yep, there go 3 trout out of that hole. That sucks.
By the way, in the comments, we had Jean saying that last week lake trout were close to the surface, so you also better pack your top waters.
Our neighbor goes up to Canada like 2 or 3 times a year, and so he was just up there for one of his trips last week, it sounds like. And it sounds like the lake trout were close to the top. So
who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
I think
yeah,
casting like spoons, like you were saying, Emily, that could work too then. Because like I'm not very confident ice fishing, I'm very confident jigging the spoons. I don't know if open water I would be, but like casting them out, reeling them in, especially if they're up high, yeah, that could work great.
Can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah.
But something else that I want to chat about is I think one of the things that you are really good at is like we're talking about these ventures, going to new places, Cliff Lake. That is an adventure a lot of people want to take, maybe even bucket list. Like I would say that, right? But I think that you are also really, really good at finding some of the local adventures, some of the overlooked bodies of water. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that you're out fishing some of these places that other people aren't really fishing. And I know that you're finding fish there. So I guess, how do you end up in some of these random places? You just see water and you got to get there?
Yeah, I'm a very curious person, especially when it comes to anything outdoors. Like I just want to know. So I don't care if I find out that there aren't fish there. Like I'm not upset if I find out, oh, this lake really isn't that great, or maybe I just suck that day. But I don't mind that. I just want to know for the future. So like I'll get to help out with our local DNR office with their fish shocking and fish netting and all that kind of stuff. Half the reason I do that is because I just love knowing like, oh wow, we have all these fish here. The fish this species are all like this size right now. There's all these bait fish over here. They're hanging out in this spot. Like never knew that. It's just really cool for me to know about what fish are doing, even if it's not to catch them. I just love knowing what they're doing because it's all under the water. You have no idea really what's going on if you're not out there catching them or using like live scope or something to find them. So for me, as somebody without that, it's like when I go out, if I catch a fish, then I know it was there. Or again, if I'm with the DNR, I get to like see that fish are in a certain spot, and that's cool. But if I'm going to like a new body of water, it's usually, yes, it's very simple. It's either I'm driving along and I saw this body of water. Oh, I should try that sometime. Or I go on Google Maps and I look around at like the satellite view of what lakes are nearby or rivers. I say, huh, should try that sometime. Sometimes it's even as simple as like somebody in a Facebook group will be talking about where they go for certain types of fish. I'm like, might as well try it. Doesn't hurt, especially if my favorite thing is when I have a trip planned somewhere and I can stop at multiple places on the way if I'm not in a rush. So like last year I did a trip to La Crosse to fish the Mississippi, but on the way there, I stopped in Spring Green to do some trout fishing in the streams there. That was new. And then I went and fished across on Mississippi, which I was used to. But then on the way back, I went and fished in Madison. So that was cool. But again, like that's one trip technically turned into like 3 mini trips. So that's great.
Okay, but I'm even thinking of, and I don't want to blow out your spot. That's why I was, I guess, being super vague. But I think even like you go to like local parks, or I don't know, some of these even tiny, like when you're saying, oh, like look on Google Maps, or like, we'll look on Onyx. I'm pointing the wrong way. Over there is, I guess,
Yep.
we'll look there. But some of these tiny little like parks and stuff in neighborhoods and the communities, I'm like, I know that I've seen you post like pumpkin seeds and bluegills, like bigger than what some people will ever see in their life, right? And I think some of these
Oh yeah.
really great fish are in unassuming places. And so I think to some extent it takes some confidence to go to an area like that, like a place that otherwise like people aren't fishing, and to just, I guess, have the confidence to go and throw the lure there. That is so fun.
Right. Yeah, that pond that has the hybrids, they're hybrids with pumpkin seeds and green sunfish. So they have massive mouths on them. They're super aggressive, but they also have that like pumpkin seed orangish pattern to them with the blue
Mhm.
flakes on them. So they're super cool looking fish. They're much taller than green sunfish. So they get giant. They're huge fish, or they can be at least. And yeah, that was a public pond around Oshkosh here that like hardly ever see anybody fish it, and it's just loaded with fish. I'm not going to be the guy out here blasting saying exactly where it is,
Yeah.
because I don't want that to happen either. But yes, like there's times that I've put in time to spots that I say, oh, it's a pond or a river or a lake, could be good, might as well give it a shot, and it's not good. And there are so many times like that. But then all of a sudden you find that one gem that you had no idea was there. You fish it and it's just loaded with fish, and it's awesome. And the other thing too, I've noticed that with my angle of like making fishing content and trying to keep things valuable to people, not just "Ooh, look at me, here's me with a fish," because it's not helpful. When I'm posting something, I want it to be valuable. So if I go shore fish for a week, to me that's not at all a waste of time, because if I can show someone a shore fishing spot that's good, or show someone even that it's just possible to catch fish from shore, to me that's a win, because potentially I'm getting somebody more addicted into fishing, more hooked, get it, somebody more excited about fishing and wanting to go fish just because they saw someone else catch a fish. That's what I've noticed. There sometimes people will complain because they'll make a post about fishing somewhere and then there's a lot of traffic out there the next day or two. Like, to me that's a good thing. You're getting more people out fishing. There are a lot worse things in the world that could be going on, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Well, and you're making a really great point, because it's like, I guess, not to be rude, it's not the Josh and Emily's of the world that are showing up at these spots, right? Because like we have other spots and we can like, find fish, and
Right.
that's great. But it's like these people who maybe don't have spots. Maybe they haven't done this before. Maybe they have all these lures that they're not catching fish on, and they just, are really hopeful for a spot. That accessibility that you're providing. Like you said, it's you don't want to blow spots out either. And so there is that. But when you can provide to people enough of a tip to give them the confidence to go other places, or to catch a few fish, to try something else, I think that is what it's all about. That is so important.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot of people who only will get out on like one weekend a month or like one day a month. And yeah, if they're gonna go use my post to find a spot to fish for the one day a month they get to fish, why would I be upset about that? Like, I would do the exact same thing if I had very limited time to fish every month. That just makes sense. Coolest story I have about that is last year, I think it was like October. There was a dad who texted me on Facebook. I had no idea who this guy was, but he messaged me saying, "Hey, my two daughters really want to get some fresh fish for dinner. I am hardly out fishing." I think he was working two jobs at the time. So he was taking care of them too. So he hardly had any time to fish. And he was just essentially asking me, "Hey, where's somewhere I could go and catch some fish, specifically bluegills, crappies, or perch?" Because he liked those. Where could I go to catch those? How would you do it? Just hoping you'll help me out. Thanks. So I gave him like two paragraphs of exactly where I would go, exactly how to do it. Because again, I feel for the guy. Like, you're never out. Of course, I'm going to give you some, at least a little bit of a step in the right direction. So I give him that, and I hear absolutely nothing in return. And I'm thinking, all right, somebody and their 27 buddies just went out there the next day and pounded the fish for the fake story that they gave me. But then a couple days later, he says, "Hey, sorry, I forgot to get back to you." Sent me a picture of his two daughters smiling with plates of fish in front of them. And he said that everything I told him was spot on. They went there, they caught tons of bluegills, kept enough fish for dinner, and his daughters were stoked. So to me, that's like that type of thing is why I do what I do. It's not the ooh, look at me, I caught a fish, whoop-de-doo, like likes, comments, that stuff's whatever. That's social media, that's how it is. But to me, it's more of like, who am I really impacting here? Who can I really help out?
Mhm.
I think that is so cool because not only was that like such a positive experience for that dad, but also those girls. You have all those people you don't even know who you're reaching necessarily, and that is I think really neat. And plus, when you're talking about a place like Winnebago or some of these big bodies of water around us, I mean, like I'm not gonna say there's unlimited fish because that's not how it works. Like we gotta love our environment a little bit, but I'm saying there's like a lot of fish out there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the the walleye harvest level on Lake Winnebago every year is around 15%. And in case you didn't know, walleyes are like one of the most sought after fish around here that people love to keep when they catch them. So to me, if walleye harvest is only at 15% every year, and I would assume, I don't know exactly on the numbers on this, but I would assume that spawning replenishes that and then some. Um, you really don't have to worry too much about what you're keeping here, at least on these bigger systems. That's why if I go to a smaller spot, like a small lake, I'm not going to say where I am because if I post that to a very large audience, like I've grown to have, it's not asking for anything good. It's just asking to drive pressure to that spot, potentially fish out the whole lake. I've seen that not with my posts, but I've seen that we've all seen it where somebody blows up a lake that's tiny and can't handle the pressure. And then a lot of folks show up, fish it because obviously if there's lots of fish there and you know it, why not? And that's fished out, and then everybody's sad because there's not really any big fish left. It's what do you do? But yes, I think the numbers of fish on Winnebago are pretty great. I always am cognizant of what I'm posting though, in the sense that I don't want to do more harm than good. Because at the end of the day, I'm sharing fishing reports that can help people catch fish. But if there's no fish left to catch, then what am I here for?
Mm.
Makes my job a lot harder. But I'm also realizing I'm still posting a lot of fishing stuff, but I'm sort of finding unique ways to post about fishing stuff over the last couple months. There have been a lot of ways that have been showing up in my life for me to help in ways that I did not expect. So one quick story of that, like probably a month ago now, a fishing partner of mine texted me that another fishing partner of mine was so starving and he had barely any money at the time that he was eating plain toast for his meals and he was feeding his dog before him. So I could have said, dang, that sucks. Hope he figures it out. But instead, I brought him a cooler of food to last him a day or two, and then I used my platform on social media to make a post about that, hoping that it would at least help him out somewhat. Raised over $3,000 in food, dog food, and cash donations for this one guy to help him get back on his feet and survive. And so that was like, I would have never expected what I'm doing on Facebook to matter to that level to one person. Because again, fishing reports are great. That helps people go catch fish. That's cool. But like actually making that big of a difference in someone's life to help them survive, like would have never seen that coming. So I was very glad that that worked out that way. And there's been a lot of examples lately where I've just been able to help in ways that I didn't quite seeing it go. But now that I'm done with college and now that I'm having more time to be out fishing, I'm just noticing that there's ways I can have a bigger impact than just going and catching fish and talking about that.
Mm.
Well, and I think stories like that are so important because fishermen, I guess I'm going to overgeneralize here, so I apologize in advance, right? But if you think about it, fishermen are labeled in maybe even a cheeky way as like over exaggerators, perhaps liars. Like they won't tell you their bait, or they'll, what lake were you on, or where'd you catch the fish in the water? Like sarcastic. And I don't think like necessarily any of those are that bad because, like I said, it's kind of a cheeky thing. But when you have examples where the fishing communities are coming together, I think of, some of these tournaments that go on throughout the year and they raise money for, St. Jude's or communities or individuals. And I think that there's so much good that does go on in the fishing community that actually people don't get to hear about. And so it's kind of nice actually that you have that platform to share that out. And I think, like you're saying, it really kind of ignites that spark in other people too.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that's like a tangent we could go on about the whole world currently. But yes, I've noticed that negative posts and things, they always do a lot better on social media because people just want to have somebody to point a finger at and say, ooh, look what they did wrong or something like that. But yes, when I can highlight something positive, that's much better. So like even probably a few days ago now, there were a couple of kids standing on a dock, like I'm talking 8-year-old kids probably. I was shocked by this, but heard one of them yell out while I was fishing by him in the boat, say, "Are you Matthew Crawford?" I'm like, "Are you old enough to have Facebook?" Like, I thought there was like a minimum of like 20 or something on there at least. That's like for old people supposedly. But the kid and his buddy were there, and then his dad showed up, and they were all just stoked to see me. So I gave the kids some baits to leave with. Again, like, could have just said, "Yep, hey, it's me." But I wanted to give them something more memorable at least. So I gave them a pack of baits, took a picture with them, and then posted that, not as like a "ooh, look at me," because it's 2 packs of baits. Like, it's not life changing here, but it was more of a look at this, look at these kids who are so excited about fishing, and you could just see it in their eyes in the picture. They were so happy to be there, so happy to talk about fishing. And their mom and dad texted me later that the kids, like, today, I got texted after a few days ago this happened, that the kids are still talking about it. Like, not that big of a deal, but if you say so. But that's just, again, like, that's the positive impact that I'm having in places that I didn't quite expect to when I first started doing this. And I'm learning that the more I keep my eyes open for it, the more opportunities I'm finding. The opportunities are there. I just have to be willing to focus a little bit less on myself and catching fish, and more on like, okay, yep, I'm out catching fish, but where else is there a need that I can help with in some way?
hmm Well, and following, kind of this whole train of thought, um, there's a lot. We were just talking about some of the negative aspects about sharing out spots to fish or sharing out tips on how to catch fish. But in my opinion, as a natural resource professional, I think there's more good that comes from that, because I think when any one person can take ownership of a spot or a technique or something that they learned, and they are like, oh, look at, I was successful, and like, even though you shared that information, they take that, they internalize it, and I think it really brings a sense of like, oh, well, now I can go do this on a regular basis, and now I have to make sure that I protect it, right? And that's where I think a lot of that cheekiness that Emily was talking about comes from, because we're all very protective of the resource. It just happens that sometimes we're almost overly protective to the point where we don't really want to share with each other. But I think that the more sharing that goes on, I think, is the better for the resources, because people tend to care more about it then, right? And if everybody
Right.
knows all of the spots or all of the stuff, then it's not a secret, and we can all keep it nice. So I think there is some good that comes from sharing information. I just don't think it gets talked about enough.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at long term and the future of our fisheries, I mean, this is a whole debate, I guess, unfortunately. But the like DNR funding, for example, you'll know more about this than me about the specifics, but I know that most DNR stocking is being cut in the next year or two of fish because there just isn't enough money to do it anymore. Like, expenses have only increased for them. License costs for anglers have not increased, so there's not more money being brought in. So the best we can do, really, if you're not going to raise the license costs, you need to bring more anglers in to offset that. I don't know how many you'd possibly need to bring in to offset that cost and bring more money in for stocking. But again, if you're educating people, there's much better chance that they'll be into fishing, then they'll share that with someone else. And it's like a domino effect. It's not just, yeah, I'm showing this person how to catch fish and that's it. It's like, you show them how to catch fish, they're going to love it. They more than likely will show someone else what they learned and how to catch fish too. So yes, from like a conservation side of things, my hope long term is that we find some way to balance out funding for the DNR and make sure that they have enough to do what they do, because it is very important to our fisheries.
Well, and so for someone like you to start cutting your teeth and looking at those kinds of issues is a great thing, because there are options. There's other models that states have run, and I could go like a whole episode on just how that works. But there is a group in Madison. Um, I might have to put it in the comments, but there's a group in Madison that's like anglers for hatcheries or something.
Yeah.
And they're doing a lot of lobbying for funding, and going towards some of these other state models that have worked really well. Something that we as citizens probably wouldn't even notice. It would get like a 5-minute blip on a morning news thing, and everybody would be like, oh, that's interesting, and then never notice it again. And so those models out there exist. It's just the people running the show need to get their butt in gear, and the stocking thing is just a temporary thing, in my opinion. I think that it's more or less just it was a symptom of poor timing. It related all the way back from everything from politics to weather, kind of came together in a perfect storm this year. So I think it'll come back. It just is. There's some stuff that does need to change.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I had heard funding was a big contributor to it, but again, like, you know more than me about it. I just hear the word on the street.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, but there's two things that I'm getting from what you guys are talking about. And number one is that each angler, although me myself, I feel like I have no part in that. Like what I say, my voice doesn't count. I don't matter, whatever my opinion is or why or whatever. But that it does. I think what I'm hearing from you guys is that there are ways to reach out or to get that message across or to try to, have some effect. And I think that's a really cool thing that isn't talked about very much in the angling community, because so often, we're in the middle of Langlade County, Wisconsin, and Anago is not the middle of nowhere compared to some of these places, but it sure feels like it when we're talking about legislation and the environment and all that stuff. So cool reminder that is out there. And the second point, I might have forgotten. I'll be honest. We just got to chatting. Yeah, I kind of poofed out. I'll probably think of it later. But I think what the other thing that you were mentioning is getting more anglers into the sport. Like if we had that many more people buying fishing licenses, and I think actually that is kind of a funny thought. Like what would we have to do as anglers to really get people out there? And I think that is like a whole loaded conversation, but it is kind of funny. And I think, with the holiday weekend, people are kind of eager to get out, and ultimately like bringing your friend and spreading the love is maybe even that first step. Mm-hmm. Oh, and I remembered my point. Oh yeah. That's why these conversations are so important. That's why you bring your friends out, right? Because actually way earlier this season, ice was melting, spring was coming. And actually I was talking to somebody and they were mentioning about how, like, oh yeah, when the panfish spawn, and then we go out there and we like get all our fish for the year. And they were so excited about that. And on one hand, it's like not for me to judge, if you're in your limit, if you're doing your thing and whatever, like cool, awesome. And I'm not here to debate that. But what I did mention is like the conversation was friendly enough that it allowed me to be like, here's why I don't keep those fish, right? And it wasn't about who was right or wrong. It was just sharing experience. And that person, actually, after I shared my experiences, and this never happens, right? This sounds like a fake story, but they had never been taught. Like they knew that fish came shallow. They knew that they were spawning, but they never actually put together that the fish that they were keeping like weren't spawning or like weren't protecting nests or like weren't, they had never considered any of that because they had just grown up in the world of fishing where you just go and fish the spawn and keep the fish. And that's so cool, right? So I think though, to fill in those gaps for people, and it's not about who's right or wrong, right? But again, it's that sharing experience. And some of that goes so far, you never know what somebody's going to learn.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I mean, it's a very controversial thing with fishing overall, that fishing is allowed during most spawning seasons. It's allowed for a lot of different fish, like walleyes, for example. People pound the walleyes during the walleye run, and that's their spawning time. But then you look at like certain animals that are hunted that can't touch them, like ducks in the spring. You can't touch a duck in the spring, but yet with fish you can. It's so it just that's a long-standing tradition, but I do sometimes wonder stuff like that. Like, why is that? Why is it that way? And again, there are some people who lobby to close down the walleye spawn. And then like today, noodling for flatheads. The only time noodling happens is when those flatheads are in their den to spawn. So like it's a very cool catch and release opportunity. Like you go manhandle a fish with your bare hands, bring it out, take quick pictures, and then let it go. But like I had a lot of people already commenting saying, well, how did they taste? Or like, what do you do with them? You keep them? Or I love those. Those are delicious. Where should I go? And again, it's like, I'm not here to tell someone, no, you should not keep it. It's more of I say that I personally don't keep them this time of year because they are in their dens to spawn. It's cool that like they're very tough fish. They're similar like sturgeon. They can easily handle being pulled out of there, shown out of the water for a couple seconds, then put back in. But like keeping them, taking those very old fish out of the population that have great genetics for growing much bigger flatheads in the future, like Just again, not my place to tell someone that what they're doing is wrong or what they should do, but just sharing why I do what I do is definitely not a bad thing. And I think people can appreciate that. No one wants to be told they're wrong. No one wants to be told, oh yeah, what I'm doing is right. You must follow it. It's just, but people are curious. They want to know.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. We've talked a lot about a lot of things, but
Yep.
I think, anglers are excited to get out on the water. And, we did talk a little bit about shore fishing. And I think right now, maybe people who have boats have a plan coming up for the weekend. Usually for the holiday, people have kind of plans. But let's say that we do have those people who are just like, winging it this weekend. Do you have any tips on finding a good shore spot? Like, what does a good shore spot look like? And where do you start with tackle?
Well, specifically this time of year, I would be looking for a river if you can, because the water is so dang warm. Like rivers will hold fish all year long, and I will stand by that till the day I die. If you're on the Mississippi River, if you Google shore fishing around La Crosse, I have a whole article on shore fishing there. I'll be posting not this week, but the next week after that, or 2 weeks after. I'll be posting videos about shore fishing, Appleton, Neenah, Menasha. So that's cities around Oshkosh over here. But just generally looking for spots, like again, rivers are a great place to look, but not necessarily in the heavy current, but in the slower current next to the heavy current. I still fish the shallow water in the rivers. There's just always fish in there, even in that warmer temperature. I don't know why they do it, but they're just up shallow feeding. Other than that, hair jigs. If I tell you anything other than hair jigs right now, I'd be lying, because the entire last 2 years, all I've been preaching on Facebook is hair jigs, hair jigs, hair jigs, because they have worked from me from March when there are still ice sheets floating down the Wolf River and I'm catching walleyes on hair jigs while there are literal chunks of ice floating down past me, all the way to November where there's skim ice at the boat ramp. Like hair jigs with trailer hooks on the back just work perfectly every time. They Again, you want the trailer hook in the colder water. Warm water right now, good sized walleyes and a lot of fish, they're going to just inhale the whole hair jig. But I will say, I was fishing with somebody 2 days ago in the river here in Oshkosh. I was running a stinger hook. He was insistent that the stinger hook didn't matter this time of year. I was catching like 3 times the amount of fish that he was. And as soon as he put the stinger hook on, he started catching them at the same rate. Like we were working the bait the same way, same color jig, same weight of a jig. And just again, having that trailer hook on the back just buried in like the tail section of the hair. It's just that way, if a fish bites the tail end of the hair jig, they're still going to get hooked. So that's important. But yes, if I told you anything other than hair jigs, I'd be lying. But I will say there's like other options if you don't own any hair jigs. The Kalen's bucktail jigs that I've been preaching about, they're out of stock everywhere right now, so you can't even get them. So other options would be paddle tails, jig heads and paddle tails. Those work great. I like if I was going to go with any other baits other than hair jigs, it would probably be paddle tails, like 1/4 ounce or 3/8, and then blade baits. Blade baits catch a ton of fish. You just can't really use them in heavy weeds. But if you're fishing again in a river on rocks or sand, blade baits work great.
Mm. And that's kind of a reaction type bait. And I think this is the time of season for that. Fish are cruising around and they are really kind of on the chew. And I guess that's what we love about summer. You said, like, what did you say? Cruising on into fall or what? I don't remember how you put it, right? But that is kind of because, like you're saying, once you find a spot where these whatever presentation is working, like until fall, you might be able to find fish in some of these. I guess they do push out even a little deeper, but those fish will be in those areas for a while.
It's funny you say summer is your favorite, because summer is actually my least favorite season to fish, just because I don't like the heat. So if I'm out, and it's especially if it's flat calm, if it's windy, we're good. But if it's like the flat calm 97-degree day and sunny, gotta wear so much sunblock just to not burn like crazy. I do burn like crazy. And then you just no matter what you wear, you're gonna be boiling throughout the day. So summer, yes, fish are biting, but fish are also biting in fall, winter, and spring. So I literally summer's like the time where I spend half the time tubing and going to sandbars and doing fun things like that in the water rather than fishing. But I still might fish like the evenings or the morning or even overnight when it's cooler out. That's one
Okay,
thing I
so
definitely do in
the
summer.
favorite time of fishing has an asterisk. I think when we mention that, it's more of specifically panfish and almost specifically trolling. And so like
Just 'cause
those,
you can cover water easier than an ice season.
well, and I just feel like we, when you can hit some good pockets of bigger fish during the spawn, and then in the wintertime, you can weed through fish, like you can go through a bunch of fish and catch some bigger ones, right? Because a lot of times in the wintertime they don't school up by size as much. And so you just have to kind of, if you find fish, then you kind of have to weed through them to get some bigger ones. In the summer, though, I feel like there is a very even gradient of size, and in this what people call dog days, like my favorite time to fish crappies has to be the second week in July through the second week in August, and that's like
Not
people's
specific at all, just generally.
like people like hate, like that's people's worst time, and it's one of my most productive times. But I grew up fishing in that time frame. I spent a lot of time fishing that because that was kind of where my family was doing our vacations. And so I've taken those techniques that I learned during the vacation on the one body of water, I've been able to translate it and duplicate a lot of that bite on a lot of other bodies of water. And it's just super fun because I personally, like we were talking at the beginning of the show, I really like fishing. And so when I can combine catching with fishing, it's so much fun for me because I can continue to map and I can look for structure and I can do points for ice fishing because all summer I'm just scouting for ice. That's really all I'm doing. And but when you get locked down on spots like in the fall, it's a lot of like fishing groups of fish, right? Because they're starting to pile up for winter. And so when you're locked down on a spot, it's hard to like search around because a lot of the fish are congregated in those main areas. But in this next 6 weeks, I'm able to go and scout all these lakes while still catching some really nice fish. And the other thing is it's really fun just, as a panfish angler, it's fun to use big baits. I like catching crappies on 3 and 4 inch baits. It's super fun just to be able to do that because the rest of the year I'm using really small stuff. So, just get to throw some odd stuff. And then you get the odd walleye or a nice smallmouth or pike once in a while. So it's kind of fun.
So when you're trolling panfish, are you trolling suspended fish?
So that really depends on the lake, and it depends on it depends on a few factors. So a lot of times it's mostly I start out by focusing on weed edges. And it's not necessarily the emergent weed edges so much as it is submergent weed edges and then weed edge gradients. So like even if it's in 12 feet of water, but there's only 6 inches of weeds on the bottom, that might hold bigger fish because then, 30 feet up, 10 yards, 20 yards up towards shore, you might start getting a wall of weeds. And that's where smaller fish tend to be. And that's why you find a lot of predator fish, bass, pike in those areas, is because they're ambush predators. Plus, that's where the size fish they're eating are. The bigger panfish will push out and they'll eat a lot of the minnows. And they take advantage of the fact that those predators are either swimming through those weed edge walls, or the minnows are just kind of coming in and out, because if they stay in the open water, they have an escape route. If they stay in the weeds, it's hard for them to escape, especially because they like to stay in a school.
Well, and that's exactly where I was going to say. The other interesting thing about it is sometimes we fish off the same side of the boat, right? But sometimes we each fish off one side, and that doesn't sound very extreme, but just the size of the boat, sometimes that's enough of a difference in depth that, he is fishing almost 5 feet shallower or deeper than what I am, depending on which way we're going on a lake, right? But it is kind of really interesting to be able to fish like right by the weeds and then outside on the edges.
But I'll even push out, like when you said suspended, there's sometimes where there's fish that are suspended. If they're in 15, 18 feet of water, they might be 6 feet off the bottom. So it's not like totally suspended. But what's usually happening at that point at least in the area lakes here, is that they're setting up on the thermocline. And so a lot of times when the lakes are hard thermocline this time of year, the warm water's on top, the cold water's on bottom, and really the lowest fish can be with the highest amount of oxygen is right on that thermocline. And so if they go below it, the oxygen gets lower, like really quickly. And then towards the bottom of the lake, it's usually towards zero until you start getting back up towards the weeds, because the weeds produce oxygen. But when you get away from the weeds and you're fishing sand flats or you're fishing mud flats or whatever, and it's no vegetation, and you have that thermocline, it's starting to get into that 15 to 20 feet of water or deeper, the lower part of the water column is not really going to have any oxygen until it mixes in the fall, right? So we have turnover, and then it mixes that oxygen, and that's what kind of feeds the lake through the winter time.
I mean,
it's an interesting process.
Yeah, what you're describing for bluegills on the weed edges is like the exact same as I find in Winnebago in the summer.
Mhm.
I'm never finding the biggest bluegills right against the weeds. It's like you'll get the shallow stretch of weeds, a wall of it, and then you get to like that next chunk of weeds that's just barely growing off the bottom. And that's where I seem to get the bigger bluegills. I've never had any kind of sonar in the boat in the past. This year I have a side imaging unit, but in the
Mhm.
past I've never had any kind of sonar. So I would just essentially start at the weed edge and like let the boat almost drift out with slip bobbers, something like anchoring sporadically to figure out kind of right where those bigger fish were. And they'd always be a good ways out from the shallow weeds. They'd be like in this deeper water, but where if I threw like a jig with a treble hook on it of some kind, like again, like a hair jig with a stinger hook or like a crankbait or something that was hitting bottom, I would be pulling in weeds, but not as if you were throwing in a giant weed bed, just like your, sparse weeds. So that's definitely something I've noticed out here too. And like, I'll go somewhere that's similar, but then doesn't have those weeds on the bottom, won't catch any.
Yep.
The other thing that I'll throw out here is just in case there's people who like a trophy bluegill, in my opinion, acts different than like a regular smaller bluegill, like an eater size, and they stick to the weeds, and that's great. And it's so fun to catch and go throw bobbers and do that too. But like you're saying, some of these bigger bluegills act a little bit more like a predator. They're going in these more open spots of water, but I also think that they hit baits a little bit different. So maybe that's just in my head, or maybe it's just their size, but I swear that they crush those baits a little bit harder and run with them. And so if you can find them, get ready.
Yeah, I would say like usually when I'm slip bobber fishing in the summer, it's with night crawlers because the little chunks of it look like the snails that they're eating in this lake. And when I'm using those, yes, usually if the bobber shoots down fast, like really solid and sticks, it's going to be a better fish. Where if it's like getting pecked at, or like it kind of just barely goes down, or it goes down just slightly, comes back up, like that's usually not the bigger fish. It's usually those ones where it really shoots down.
Well, and like Emily said, people shouldn't forget, if people are out there using plastics, don't be, and you're specifically targeting bluegill, don't be afraid to use like a 2-inch fluke or an 1.5
A
fluke
leech
or
type bait?
a leech type bait that's 2 or 2.5 inches. Like for one, it really weeds out some of the smaller fish. Like, yeah, your bobber might get pecked at, but sometimes that's okay down, because that draws attention, right? Because every fish is jealous. If there's something good, like they all want to eat it if it's easy. And those big ones will push the little ones out of the way as long as they have time to get there. Because that's always the problem with sometimes fishing with live bait, right? Is because those little ones are like little piranhas and they just chew it off so fast before anything else can get to it. But yeah, don't pass over some of those smaller, the 2-inch medium, I guess, minnow baits, because like you'll get crappies, bluegills, maybe a walleye once in a while. Like 2 inches is pretty much the standard for bait fish size for predators. So yeah.
Oh my goodness. I'm looking at the time here and I'm like, I feel like we just got started. So I have to ask, do you have fun? Well, I guess we did talk about Cliff Lake in Canada. So I guess maybe this is a duplicate question, but any other fun adventures that we should look for coming up? Do you have events coming up, things that we should keep in mind?
The one I'm most excited for right now is I'm actually headed to Maine in September to do some saltwater fishing. on the ocean,
Sweet.
and I'll be doing some shark fishing. The folks I'm staying with there, I actually met them on the water like a week ago. I took them fishing, friend of a friend type deal. And they said that if I want to, I can catch sharks all day long
Oh,
over in Maine. I'm like, yes, please. Like they acted like sharks were not a big deal and that nobody really targets them. As someone who fishes freshwater, yes, please, all day
yeah.
long. I'll take it. Absolutely. So I'm very excited for that. And a lot of my trips are very last minute around here.
Mhm.
Like I'm going to Lake Michigan tonight. Didn't know that till like 4 hours ago. So I never really plan stuff out long term. It's just unless it's a huge trip. But if it's just like a trip around Wisconsin, usually it's, oh, I kind of want to fish for something different. Let's go over here. Let's try this. So I like to keep it interesting, always changing it up.
Nice.
And so for people who are going to keep following along on all your ventures, what is the best way to follow you?
Matthew Crawford on Facebook.
And not actually in our boats with you to your fishing spots or shark fishing?
Right.
Oh my goodness. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here with us tonight and chat about all of this, especially when you're like about to fly out on another adventure. But I know we'll be watching.
Oh yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah. And we look forward to the next time we bump into you in person because that's always a ton of fun.
Mhm.
And
yeah.
to everybody else at home, we look forward to the next time that we bump into you as well. So it might be next week on this podcast, or hopefully it's actually out on the water. But either way, we'll give you a fishing report on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everybody.